By the way, you were mocked for that. Even by conservative commentators took him to task. So I want to talk about it, and I have some questions. But before we do, I want you to give the context in your own words. And we're going to go to the video, as you would say, out one, go.
Discussion of the 25th Amendment was simply how many other cabinet officials might support such an effort.
Something remarkable happened. The former deputy director of the FBI, Andrew McCabe, confessed to helping lead a coup d'etat against the President of the United States. This is a silent coup.
Where did the President get this latest conspiracy theory from?
This is about the Obama administration's spying.
White House officials say that the President's sources were various conservative outlets, most prominently Graham's radio host Mark Levin.
The evidence is overwhelming. Exhibit 1. Wiretap communications have been provided to the White House. 3 months ago, I talked about the police state tactics of the Obama administration. And that now is a fact. Now forget about Russia. Watergate applies to what the Obama administration did. I'm telling you, this is the scandal of the century. So it's nice to see now that we have radio hosts who are concerned about this. Where the hell were they in March? Wiretaps. Oh my God, Trump must be colluding with the Russians. And I said, look at this, domestic surveillance of a campaign by an administration. You cannot tell that the President of the United States didn't know that. They were spying on these people and leaking their names to the media. Here the media are pushing the impeachment of the president. I'm calling them out for their coup efforts, which they admit they're involved in, but don't call it a coup. It gets worse and worse. The more we are learning the depths to which senior FBI officials, senior Justice Department officials, and others try to reverse the course of history and reverse the course of your vote. This is a tremendous scandal. And when the historians write their history books, they're going to view it as one of the great scandals in American history. This is a sign.
When did he know it? And are we ever going to get to the bottom of that? And 2, what was the media's involvement with all this?
Well, first of all, Obama knew everything, because I got it out of the newspapers. I assume he reads the newspapers. I just put it together piece by piece by piece. You know, as a former senior Justice Department official, I read these things, and then before my radio show a couple of years ago, almost 2 years exactly. So what the hell was this? And this, and this, and this. FISA, somebody leaked that. Now who would leak that? The FBI would leak it, because the FBI would be the only ones who knew about it. Then the New York Times piece, wiretaps, that was their headline, not mine, not the president's. And they changed it later, you know, so they could attack Trump. Wiretaps. And I said, what in the world? They've been surveilling Trump and his campaign. What else could they possibly mean by this? Also at the same time, they lowered the regulations, the requirements for sharing of information between law enforcement and intelligence agencies, and they were unmasking the names of individuals at a record rate. And the media, oddly enough, when I brought this up, they started to attack me as a conspiracy theorist, which is really kind of strange considering I was using their articles. How can I be a conspiracy theorist when I'm using the New York Times and McClatchy and the Washington Post, who these senior Justice Department and Department of Justice people were obviously leaking to, the FBI and so forth. Otherwise, how would we know? And I knew it was the FBI, because all roads of these investigations, counterintelligence and criminal, go through. And now we know McCabe's a leaker, and Baker was a leaker, and Stroke was a leaker, and God knows who else is a leaker. All the senior officials at the FBI are gone, and they're gone for a reason. That's why I took it on, and for a week, the media started attacking me as a conspiracy theorist. No, I don't care about the media. They attack me as a conspiracy theorist. How stupid is that when it's their articles that I'm reading from? But they had a problem. They were the recipient of these leaks. They knew the FBI and others were leaking it. And they needed to protect their sources. And they have such a hate-on for our great president, that on the one hand, they are the mouthpiece for the sources, and then on the other hand, they want you to pretend that none of this is going on at the FBI. As we now know, 2 years later, all of it was going on at the FBI.
And Obama, what's going to happen?
Here's my one problem with the investigation that the Republicans led when they controlled the House. They started from the bottom up. You notice how the Democrats do it?
Top
They
down.
pound the president, pound his family, and whatever flows from that, flows from that. We're chasing, Lisa Page, we're chasing, which is fine. Obama has never had to account for what took place in his administration. Never, ever, ever. And I want you people here to know this. If you have a FISA surveillance warrant against a member of a presidential campaign of the opposite party, as an old chief of staff of justice, I want you to know, there is no way the White House didn't know about that. There is no way the president wouldn't have been told about that. That story's never been told, and it may never be told because of the Praetorian Guard left-wing kook media that we have in this country.
It's okay. We're going home tonight. We're going to a beautiful home in Northwest Washington with its very tall wall, which, by the way, is a perfect segue, if I do say so, to talking about the southern border. So we know the left doesn't want a border. They don't want a border for one reason only, and it's the word votes. Because they know everyone coming across votes their way. You can be sure that if people coming across voted a Republican ticket, that wall could go up faster.
No, they'd have snipers up on the border to keep
Exactly.
people out.
Good point. But here we are. Who does know national security? Who does understand his mission? The President of the United States of America. And he understands that it's up to him to protect the American people. So, what did he do? He put into force, he invoked the National Emergencies Act of 1976. And immediately, 16 states sued the President, claiming that he's veered the country into a constitutional crisis. We have the House Democrats passing a resolution trying to block it. Now it's going to go to the Senate, where some of our, shall we call, friends on the Republican side already indicated they're going to vote for that. Let's get a Mark Levin reality check. I want you to explain the National Emergencies Act, what it is the President correct? Go for it.
Let me explain this specifically for the media out there, which is illiterate when it comes to the Constitution of the United States. Let me do this very slowly, so listen slowly. Congress passed a statute called the National Emergencies Act. They passed it almost half a century ago. It's been used over 50 times by presidents of both parties. There are aspects of the statute I don't like, but so what? That's the statute. Congress also passed other statutes involving the Defense Department and the Army Corps of Engineers. And when they passed those spending bills, they created, in effect, financial buffers where the president could move the money around as necessary. You have the legal statute, you have the financial statute. The President of the United States has done everything humanly possible to work with the Democrats. They don't want to work with them. The Republicans who are objecting have been in Congress for 412 years, and they've done absolutely nothing. Nothing. And I don't need lectures from Susan Collins and Lisa Murkowski and Lamar Alexander about the Constitution. I can tell you that. Lectures with the phony experts that you put on your cable shows, and the other phonies, the Democrats, who are applauding DACA, which had no statutory authority whatsoever, was a law that was written in the Oval Office and imposed on the American people. I don't see a single Democrat or Republican demanding the repeal of DACA based on separation of powers and constitutional grounds. And for those who use the scare tactic, that when the Democrats take over, they may do this too. The Democrats do all kinds of illegal and unconstitutional stuff when they take over. They don't need any prodding from us. That's number one. Number two, they say they'll use it on guns for the Second Amendment. You just heard our man on the Second Amendment. You can't use the National Emergencies Act legislature to change the Second Amendment of the Constitution. And I would tell our media friends in the background, that same Bill of Rights that protects you, protects us too. Colluded with the Russians. Hold on now. We can do this like row your boat. This section first. Oh, I have another secret. Shh, listen. Ted Kennedy colluded with the Russians. Hold on. You remember Nancy Pelosi colluded with the Syrians? Oh, it's true. What was that speaker's name? Jim Wright. Jim Wright colluded with the Nicaraguans. Oh, it's true. Go check your history.
We're going to need a day and a half on the stage to go through all the things the Democrats have done. There's like not enough hours in the day.
Just look at the narrative, honey, and I will call you honey, whether the left likes it or not. Big-time lawyer, smart as they come, my wife. I couldn't be more proud of her. Anyway, I forgot what I was going to say.
That's it. So I want to move to a topic that I find very, very frightening. We see a rise in anti-Semitism in this country almost on a daily basis. First, though, let's start in Europe. From France to Australia to Poland, Germany, England. The head of the Labour Party in England is an out-and-out anti-Semite. Nothing can move to the United States. We see anti-Semitism on college campuses as if it's the norm. We know about what happened in Pittsburgh. Men are getting mugged in Brooklyn. We see Democrat members of Congress who are out-and-out anti-Semites. They don't even try to hide it. I find this extremely frightening, and the worst part is it's becoming mainstream, and the media, thank you, is not even covering it. I need you to talk about this, because I know people in this room care, and this is not just a matter of that it's a problem for the Jews, it's a problem for society. And it's hard to talk about. I get choked up about it because it's extremely upsetting.
Well, there is a growing wing within the Democrat Party that's anti-Jew, that's anti-Semitic. And you have two women who the media keeps saying are the two first women Muslims elected to Congress. They also happen to be Jew-hating anti-Semitic. Hold on now. I have no problem with that, except for their Jew-hating anti-Semitism. That is a little bit of a problem. And what does Nancy Pelosi do? She puts one of them on the Foreign Affairs Committee. They have not censured them. And the congresswoman from the Minneapolis-St. Paul area daily with her hate speech and her hate talk. And the media have some responsibility for this too. You put these professors on your damn channels who are also Jew haters and anti-Semites, and then when they're caught and the public rises up, the public, not the media, and says, look at that guy, why is he on your channel? Then you barely, quietly yank their paycheck. You folks in the media have a responsibility. You know why we have a free press in this country, ladies and gentlemen? It's not for CNN and MSNBC and Comcast and Time Warner. It's for you. You. The free press is about you, the American people. That's what it's supposed to be about. Not a drama queen like Jim Acosta. No. Not Jake Tapper, who used to work for a Democrat congresswoman in Handgun Control Inc., who goes on there every night and calls the president a liar. Not for the fake legal analyst Jeffrey Toobin, who goes on there burping up whatever he's burping up every day. We expect professionalism from the media. We expect objectivity from the media. We expect news from the media. And you're failing us. You're failing the Republic. You're undermining the Constitution. You have individuals in Congress who are bigots, who are racists, and you sit there quietly or you'll do one story. And it's growing in the Democrat Party. It's growing in our college campuses. And you do nothing. Where's your documentaries? Where's your investigative teams? What are you going to do? Just sit there and keep pounding Trump?
Here's one other thing. Do you know that the FBI has reported the largest number of hate crimes has been against Jews? And by the way, that started before President Trump became president. That's under Obama's watch.
Let me be clear about President Trump. They keep painting as a racist and anti-Semite and so forth and so on. He has been the greatest president in support of Israel in the history of that country. He's the one against the Democrats, against his own party, against the media, whining about it, recognizing Jerusalem as the capital of Israel. He's the one who moved the embassy. From Tel Aviv to Jerusalem. He's the one who spoke out and talked about my brothers and sisters. It's Trump who did that. It's Trump who has a Jewish daughter and a Jewish stepson and Jewish grandkids. And while we're at it, let me just say this about Benjamin Netanyahu.
Go Bibi.
A tremendous world leader, a tremendous prime minister of Israel, a tremendous friend of the United States of America. And the same forces in our country that are trying to take down our president are the same forces in his country trying to take down the prime minister of Israel. And I, for one, stand behind both of them.
Well said. All right, I'm going to move it on to a bit of a lighter topic.
Personal.
So I'm sure all of you watch Sunday nights, 10 p.m. is Life, Liberty, and Levin. There we go. And I can say this because I'm his wife, I drew up bragging rights. Since the time that that show aired, you have owned the 10 p.m. slot on Sunday nights.
Well, in all honesty, I'm up against CNN and MSNBC.
Well, that's true. But he crushes all of them. One guy against all the others. But I can say that. So, and the reason I think that is because you bring on guests who are extremely interesting and you let them speak. Here's what most people don't know. We're going to fill you in on what you would say one of your secrets. Mark has tried so hard to get Democrats, liberals, socialists, whatever, I digress, they're all the same, on his program to have a serious, respectful, earnest conversation about their thoughts, their philosophies, and so forth. And how many have said yes? 0. So let's put on our imaginations here for a moment and imagine that you have 3 on your list who are willing to come on to have a respectful conversation. Who would the 3 be, if we have time to get to it? And what general questions would you ask each of them?
Well, we've asked Bernie Sanders repeatedly. Radio, TV, digital TV, and we get no answer. Because I really want to have a conversation about him. He gets away with these platitudes and free this and free that, and I really want to pin him down. will not happen in the media. They had a whole town hall meeting on CNN. I thought they were throwing in roses, you know, and so forth.
Chocolates.
Chocolates. Like, for instance, Bernie, you're a Marxist, aren't you? What do you mean you're not a Marxist? Of course you're a Marxist. And explain what Marxism is. You believe in Hegel, right? He'd be shocked that somebody knows who Hegel is. Not the former Secretary of Defense. I'm talking about, you know. And I would talk about Rousseau, and I would explain how he has a completely different concept of humanity and individualism and so forth. That's why he excuses Maduro. That's why he won't call him a dictator. That's why he was a big pal of the Soviet Union and Castro and Ortega and all the rest of them. I'd be talking about things that would absolutely blow up all the heads on CNN and MSNBC because they're not, you know, familiar with these sorts of things. So I would definitely want to dig into that with him. I would like to have AOC.
Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez.
AOC. To see what AOC really knows.
It's like YMCA, but
Yes. And I'd like to have a discussion with her because now this 29-year-old, dim-witted, never did anything in her life, leader of the Democrat Party.
from Westchester, New York, by the way, despite what you said.
Right, from the streets of Westchester, New York. I would love to have a conversation about her rather than watch some stupid Instagram where she appears to be dismembering a body or something with it, you know, with a knife or something like that. The press has created her as a celebrity, so I'd like to have a chat with her. And any host of liberals in the media, I would like to have a chat with too, but they don't.
Throw out one name.
Chuck Todd.
Chuck Todd.
I would like to talk about climate change, Chuck Todd.
Really? But you're not allowed to ask a question. I'm not sure you can do that.
Because I think it's Chuck Todd who is a climate denier.
Really?
Yes, so I want to have discussion because he has said, like a good little Marxist, that we're not going to have any climate change deniers on even the press.
No discussion.
And you look at these people, there's thousands of physicists, climatologists, meteorologists, experts of all kinds. He doesn't want a single one of them on his program to question man-made climate change. Well, of course the climate changes, Chuck. We all know that. The issue is what causes it. And these leftists, whether they're in the media, the Democrat Party, however they dress themselves up, they actually think if we drive less, or if we wipe out cattle, or whatever we do, that somehow that sun and that moon and gravity and the atmosphere are going to react. They're not going to react. They don't give a damn what we do with cows or anything of the sort.
But you notice they like to own the language, right? So years ago it was global warming. Then they decided that didn't fit with the script. So what did they do? They just changed the name. It's not global warming, it's climate change. So they own the dictionary.
Well, they're always changing the nomenclature. They're always changing the language. This is what they do, and you're right. It's global cooling, global warming. Now it's climate change. So if it's too cold, they think climate change. Too warm, too much rain. Look at that, there's a hurricane. We've always had hurricanes, you idiots. Well, look at that, there's an earthquake. We've always had earthquake. Look at that, there's a drought. We've always had drought. By the way, open the Bible. This stuff's all right in there if you want to check it out. Let me just say this, because we have to go now. Let me just say this. I cannot thank you enough, number one, for being at CPAC. Number two, for being engaged American patriots. Number three, for embracing our principles that are so crucial, including freedom of the press. We believe in freedom of the press. We don't believe in prostituting the press. We believe in freedom of the speech. We believe in all the amendments to the Constitution and all the Constitution. And we believe in the greatness of this country. We do not want it fundamentally transformed. We believe in the greatness of free market capitalism. We do not want it destroyed with centralized, iron-fisted autocracy and socialism. We believe in the greatness of each and every human being, which is why we reject infanticide too. And we believe in the Judeo-Christian morals that serve as the underpinning of this country. want the media to understand something, and I mean this earnestly. You think you're at the zoo at the reptile house right now, don't you? This is America.
So extraordinary, right?
Yes. This is America. We support America. We support our principles. We want America to succeed. We do not want to destroy it. And we don't give a damn what they do in the Scandinavian countries.
Yeah, because they don't talk about Venezuela, right? Talk about Syria.
And one last thought. Who is excited to see the most amazing president of the United States? Very soon. Right there. We support him. He's great. Thank you.
One last thing. We want our president to know that despite what they're trying to do to him day in and day out, despite what they're trying to do to his family day in and day out, and the sacrifices he made to become president, we stand with you. We stand behind you, and we'll be with you all the way.
Ladies and gentlemen, our next topic, the gathering storm. Would we still ignore Churchill's warning today? Please welcome from the Hudson Institute, Michael Pillsbury, and your moderator, author of The Coming Collapse of China and Losing South Korea, Gordon Chang.
Good morning, CPAC. For me, it is such a great honor to follow Mark Levin. Wasn't the great one great? The Gathering Storm is Winston Churchill's first volume of his magnificent history of the Second World War. And in this book, Churchill shows how the great Western democracies, particularly Britain and France, failed to create an enduring peace and inadvertently pave the way for the rise of the Third Reich. Michael Pillsbury, Hudson Institute, author of The 100-Year Marathon. Are we seeing in Asia a storm gathering?
Yes, and I'm happy to tell you, Gordon, that Donald Trump saw this and wrote about it as far ago as the year 2000. He talked about China as the main challenge, described some of their misconduct. At that time, he was criticized, his warnings were ignored. So it's a bit like Winston Churchill.
So what we're seeing right now, then, in a sense, is that the West, and America especially, has not heeded the warnings of President Trump, then an individual, and other people like yourselves who have seen the danger in the Chinese political system and how it's aggressive, belligerent, and territorially expansive.
Yes, in fact, Donald Trump escalated his warning in another book I brought with me today, Gordon. It's called Great Again. It came out in 2015. And in this book, he has the new thesis that there is what he calls a good China and a bad China. And he says his goal is to get the good China to be permanent and to be positive for the United States. But then he's got a wonderful sentence in here, Gordon, that says, some people have asked me not to refer to China as our enemy, but they are.
You know, and that's really important, because when you think about what the Chinese are doing, Xi Jinping, the Chinese ruler, is dropping hints that China is the world's only sovereign state. He's going back to that language of the imperial era, Tianxia, when the Chinese emperor ruled all under heaven. And clearly we've heard his foreign minister talk about this, about how they want to replace the Westphalian system, which is the current international order. And that means that Xi Jinping believes that he is the world's only ruler. And that means there's not much room for instance, the United States.
I think what President Trump did when he took office, is get the attention of the Chinese. They've made clear to me and others that they deeply respect him. In some sense, they're afraid of him. They've read his books about his comments about China. And so his first step was to say he wasn't sure the one China policy really would bind him. And he got President Xi, who he calls his friend, he got President Xi to ask him to adhere to the one China policy. So that was the first step. Then the trade talks began. The Chinese really wouldn't come. They denied everything. They said, we have not done any intellectual property theft. We haven't forced technology transfer. And basically, we're not going to negotiate with you. So then the second big step President Trump took, for which he's heavily criticized, was put the tariffs on. And the tariffs he announced were punitive. This was not some kind of protection for American industry. It was to punish China for the technology theft and the intellectual property theft.
And that is $300 to $400 billion a year, maybe a little bit more, maybe a little bit less. But we're talking about the Chinese criminally taking hundreds of billions of dollars from the U.S. If we can't commercialize our innovation, Mike, we don't have a future.
I think that's true. And the third step President Trump took was very close to what you just said. He said it twice now at press conferences, one very recently. China wants to surpass America. He said it very clearly both times in these press conferences. China wants to surpass America. But then his heroic next sentence is, it's not going to happen on my watch. I think that's great.
And what we had seen in prior administrations, really going back to Nixon, was an integrationist view of China. That we believe that if we showed kindness, if we tried to bring the Chinese into the international system, they would reciprocate. They might want to compete with us in that international system, but the idea was that China would become benign. And because of that, we've had accommodationist policies that have, in effect, accepted unacceptable behavior on the part of the Chinese, including territorial aggression, which we have seen continually throughout, not just in the South China Sea, but in the East China Sea, also in the Himalayas with India. This is a country that has believed that the West would not stop its ambitions.
Gordon, I think I would add something just by a show of hands. How many people here are Christians? How many Christians are in the audience? China makes Christianity illegal unless you do it the Chinese way. This is really bad. The oppression of Christians in China has increased over the last 10 years. And a lot of evangelical Christians used to take what they call the quiet diplomacy route. Don't talk about it. Somehow ask the Chinese nicely, please allow Christianity. In fact, that made it worse. What actually has happened, Gordon, the Chinese Communist Party, which is now 80 million members, you cannot be a Christian, you must be an atheist to be a member of the Chinese Communist Party. This has long-term consequences. It's part of what President Trump, when he wrote this book in 2015, he called the bad China. That's got to be on our agenda, and I think President Trump is already doing this. I think that's a heroic step, too.
You know, Mike, we talk about, for instance, the concentration camps where China has imprisoned more than 1 million Uyghurs and Kazakhs, Muslims. But what we have seen, especially over the last year or so, is an extension of this concentration camp program now into Tibet. We have seen a stepped-up campaign against the Christians. Even they're going against the Buddhists, who once were thought to be acceptable religionists. And so Xi Jinping is obviously determined to eliminate religion. And for us, that's very important, because not just because we may be Christian or whatever, but maybe because we're people of faith. But it's important because we see Chinese ambitions. And if we don't stop them at an early stage, we know that this is not just going to be confined to China. This is going to be something we're going to see elsewhere. You know, we look at this, we also see Huawei Technologies, nominally an employee-owned company, but really just an instrumentality of the Chinese state. Mike, when you see Huawei's ambitions to give its technology, its equipment to dominate the world's backbone for 5G, the next generation of wireless communications, what do you see?
Well, President Trump has talked about the hidden activities of China. And Huawei claims to be a private company. In fact, they're masquerading as an arm of the Chinese Communist Party. So if they can get control of the global telecommunications system, it tends to split our alliances. So the battle against Huawei, once again, is what, when Donald Trump was a candidate, the good China versus the bad China. The bad China, the hidden China, the deception, the secret control of global telecommunications, that's what President Trump is struggling against. And I think he's got a very clever, smart strategy. He's made friends with Xi Jinping, who's the master of the Chinese Communist state and the party. If he succeeds with this trade deal by having Xi Jinping come over to Mar-a-Lago, and it covers things like the Huawei deception, we're talking about one of the biggest historic agreements between the United States and any other country in world history. President Trump has made clear he knows China is the second largest economy in the world. This is the first largest and the second largest having negotiations in Mar-a-Lago. And what President Trump has set up is the Chinese are coming to our home territory for the final deal. I think that's heroic too.
I got to ask you a question, Mike. The president has read your book, The 100-Year Marathon. Obviously, you talk about a long-term Chinese goal to dominate the world. And the issue is going to be, we've tried to accommodate the Chinese, and by doing that, we've shown them that aggression works, that all the worst elements in the Chinese political system, like in Japan in the 1930s, they're starting to take over the Chinese military. So the question I have to ask you is, can we coexist with a belligerent, provocative China? Is there some way that we can find an accommodation with them, or are we just kidding ourselves? Like, for instance, Britain and France were kidding themselves about accommodating Hitler's Germany.
I think what Vice President Mike Pence said, and he got into a little bit last night here at CPAC as well, he's held out the vision, the same as President Trump in his book. Yes, we can coexist with China, but we've got to have reciprocity. We've got to have equal treatment. We've got to have fairness. No more ripping off American companies, no more violation of the world order principles. And most important of all, President Trump wants to preserve American leadership. The greatest challenge from China is to the American created and led world order that the Chinese already have been quite clear. They want to subvert. They want a Chinese-led world order. That's dangerous.
And our concept of the world is very different. It's open. Although the U.S.
democracy,
clearly free trade
and privacy,
open commons, open global commons, and the Chinese are against all of those things. It's going to be, I think, very difficult to take the Chinese and at least the Communist Party and try to integrate it. Though, of course, we can have great relations with the Chinese people. We've had before the Communist Party came into power in 1949. This is the 70th anniversary of the communism in China. So, Mike, as you think about this, the thing that does concern me, as I mentioned, is that the Chinese military, like the Japanese military in the 1930s, is gaining political power.
Yes.
And that
poses
and that poses a challenge to the United States and our allies and partners that is very difficult for us to deal with.
I think that's right, Gordon, and that's why my favorite phrase President Trump has used twice is not on my watch. What that means for CPAC, we've got to support the president in his policies toward China. We can't pretend like this is a minor issue. The border is the only thing. It's China. He's made it very clear.
In the United States, there are so many people and so many interest groups that have tried to undercut President Trump's resolute policies on China. Trump inherited a very dangerous situation with the Chinese. We've had 4 decades of policies that have been sounding good to the ear, but really haven't quite worked. And so Trump has faced the Chinese, which thinks that they can push us around. And you said that Xi Jinping, the Chinese ruler, that he admires President Trump, but the most important thing is that he fears President Trump. He fears American policy. This is, I think,
yes.
It's great. I'm afraid that the only way to deal with Beijing like this is to show strength. But there are people in America, there are financial interests, there are stock market investors who are putting pressure on the president to back down.
That's true. That's where the role of CPAC comes in, conservatives across the country. I was in President Reagan's administration. I had a kind of quiet, unknown job, the head of policy planning in the Pentagon. And we relied heavily on conservative media, conservative movements, CPAC. In fact, Reagan had first gone in 1974 to CPAC. We relied on conservatives to try to defend people inside the government who still wanted to follow the Jimmy Carter policy of the times with the Soviet Union. This is a strong struggle. I see it going on now with President Trump, where there's just too much resistance to what he wants to do.
And you remember that all the wise people in Washington during the Nixon and the Carter era said that we have no chance to compete with the Soviet Union. We have to have détente, all of this terrible stuff. And then all of a sudden a guy named Ronald Reagan comes up on the scene and says, no, we do not have to accept the Soviet Union.
For a second, there's another concept President Reagan used that the Chinese are directly challenging. President Reagan said many times, the shining city on the hill. That's not just America, it's the global order would be led by America. We would be the shining city on the hill. It's part of President Reagan's dream. The Chinese are out to stop that. They want a pagoda on the hill, not a shining city on the hill. And I don't know if you've all noticed, I hope you have, the new defense strategy the Pentagon put out a few months ago says terrorism is not the #1 threat. Iran and North Korea are not the #1 threat. The #1 threat is China. But the deep state resists this. They want to continue the old ways, just what we saw in President Reagan's administration. That's where CPAC comes in for the fight.
This is the fight of our lives. This is the fight for our children, for our grandchildren, for our friends and partners around the world. In the early days of what we now know as the Second World War, President Roosevelt called up Churchill and said, what do I call this global struggle? Churchill shot back. He said, the unnecessary war. World War II was unnecessary because the great democracies did not resist the rise of the Third Reich. We've got to make sure that for us, we do not make that same mistake. So Mike, I want you to make a pledge with me and the audience that there will be no more wars that are unnecessary.
Okay, no more wars that are unnecessary.
Thank you very much.
Ladies and gentlemen, we're live from our CPAC stage at Colorado Christian University with New Orleans Saints, Benjamin Watson.
Thank you. You can take your seats, take your seats. Yes, I am the father of 5. I was talking earlier about our kids. So we started off, we got married in 2005. We were married for 3 years and said, you know, let's start doing this kid thing. And then we had 4 kids in 4.5 years. Pray for us. Took a little time out. And then we had our baby girl Eden. And now we're having twin boys, identical twin boys, coming in April. So pray for us. Definitely pray for us. Family, however, is important to me, obviously. And anytime I can come and talk about family and the importance of family in our society is important. I was reading a recent report that was talking about family and having kids, and it said that right now, in the United States, we are not replacing ourselves. Now, there are various reasons for that, obviously. Some of those are external pressures. Some of them come because more parents are working. Some of it comes from pressure from society and maybe the outlook that people have on kids, that they are not the blessing that they are. But right now, we need 2.1 kids to replace ourselves, and right now we're at 1.7. We are dying as a culture. And that needs to change, but it only changes when people understand the importance of family. The psalmist in Psalm 127, 3-5 says, "Behold, children are a gift of the Lord, the fruit of the womb is a reward. Like arrows in the hand of a warrior, so are the children in one's youth. How blessed is the man whose quiver is full of them. They will not be ashamed when they speak with the enemies at the gate." I love that vision of arrows. Children are like weapons. They are. Children are like weapons that we pull out and that we shoot into culture. Think about the effect that we have when we raise our children the correct way, when we instill values into them. They change culture. I talk to my father, I'm the oldest of 6 kids, and I talk to my father a lot of times about what it was like raising all of us and being in a crazy household, because my household's about to be crazier with 7. And he looks proudly, him and my mother look proudly and say, "You know what? Y'all are going places that I never went." Because of what they instilled in us. Because they took their job that God gave them when it came to family seriously, poured into their children, and now their children are going around the world. My siblings are around the world doing great things for the Lord, but also great things for humanity because they took the time to pour into them over the years. If you have children, if you have some grandparents in them, if you have grandchildren, pour into them. Children are a blessing, while society will tell you that they're not. Family is a gift ordained by our Creator. It should be cherished, not mocked. Upheld, not ridiculed. Kept together, not torn apart. So much of what we see today is tearing us apart. It's tearing families apart. We see mother turned against father. We see sister turned against brother. We see parents turned against their children because of outside influences. That verse in Psalm says that the family is a gift. Secondly, family is the most important and powerful weapon when it comes to changing culture. We mentioned my book, Under Our Skin. And Under Our Skin, I talk about race. I talk about the fact that we need to have real, candid conversations. Every time we turn on the news, there's something racially motivated going on. We need to be willing to talk about those things. The living room is as important as the courtroom when it comes to making change. What are the conversations that we have surrounding this topic in our living rooms? Makes it comfortable, doesn't it? What are the faces or the expressions or the things that your children or grandchildren hear you say when issues of race come up on the television, when there are things that we don't understand? I look at my kids, they're absorbing everything that I do. And a lot of times I have to apologize for making a face about something that I shouldn't. But as parents, that's our job. The living room is teaching them how to think, how to be compassionate, how to be kind, how to be loving, how to fight for the oppressed, and how to fight for justice. All those things are taught, not at the university, not outside on our teams, not at our schools. They are taught in the home. The home is where we train them up, where we teach them to care about other people. As a nation, I would say that the strength of our families will ensure our future, or it will condemn it. When it comes to unity and solidarity, moving forward into the future, a lot of that depends on what happens in the family. We can't trust outside influences to train them. We need to be doing that in our homes. The abolitionist Frederick Douglass said, "The life of a nation is secure only while the nation is honest, truthful, and virtuous." Families pass on honesty, truth, and virtues needed for healthy interpersonal relationships as well as community relationships. All that stuff starts in the home. And our nation will only survive if honesty, truth, and virtues remain paramount. That's how it's going to survive. Dividing, division, there's always going to be some of that. We all have different views. We all come from different places. You know, we all have different worldviews, and that's okay. It's okay to be different. It's okay to have different perspectives. But there are certain things that need to be held paramount for this country to continue to succeed. Honesty, truth, and virtues. We need to all be able to come together for that. And if the truth is not what you think it is, you need to be willing to say it's not what I thought it was and move to the other side. That's okay. Because winning the argument can't be our only reason for getting involved as conservatives, liberals, involved in the conversation. It can't just be about winning. It has to be about what is true, what is honest, what is virtuous. One thing that's really important to me as a father is the issue of fatherlessness. We have somewhat of an epidemic, I would say, across the board in this country. According to some statistics, more than 1 out of 4 children live without a father. Not a father, period. Not just biological, but maybe not an uncle, not a father figure, but not a father, period, in the home. That's 19 million children in the United States live. Maybe you live without one. And it's not to say that you can't be successful, but all studies point to the fact that many social ills would be eradicated if fathers, if men, would do what we were called to do. Be what we were called to be, do what we were called to do. People are 4 times more likely to be in poverty. 7 times more likely to get pregnant as teenagers. And I've got 3 girls, so this is important to me. They're 2 times more likely to drop out of high school. They're more likely to deal with abuse, emotionally, physically, if they don't have a father that is leading their household. So men that are listening, young men, older men, if you're an older guy, challenge the young men. One thing I love about being in the locker room for the last 15 years as a pro football player is the fact that I'm in a locker room with so many different guys from all over the place. And one thing we're able to do is we have these tough conversations, but one thing as you get older in the league, which I'm like an old guy in the league, they come to me and say, what was it like back with the leather helmets? What was it like? I do. Calm down. Like, I'm not that old. Calm down. You know, I was playing with you on Madden when I was in 6th grade. Okay, all right, okay. But one thing I love about being in the locker room is that I'm able to challenge. I'm able to challenge men that whether they had a dad or not, they have an opportunity to break the cycle. They have what it takes. And not only do they have what it takes, we need them to step up. Not just for their family, but for the collective. And so this idea of manhood and fatherlessness, look, we all have different challenges. And as we unpack it, there are reasons for dads being absent sometimes. But we also all have a personal responsibility that we have the opportunity to decide how we're going to affect the next generation. One thing someone challenged me to do a while ago was to have some sort of family mission. And I don't know if you've done that before. I thought about it. We don't have anything like written out. We don't have like a preamble or anything written out for our family. But we do have, in our living room, we have a sign that my wife got, and she put it up over the fireplace, and it's just this cool little art piece of artwork that says Micah 6:8. Many of you know Micah 6:8. It says, "He has shown you, O man, what is good. And what does the Lord require of you? To act justly, to love mercy," or some translations say kindness, "and to walk humbly with your God." That's kind of our family mission. When I think about what I want my family to be known for, when I think about what I want to be known for, yes, I want to play great football, but people are going to forget about that. But if you're someone, or a family, or a group of people, a university, a country that stands for justice, that stands for mercy and kindness, and that walks humbly with your God, people will remember you. Because the things that you do will flow out of that, and you will not only win people, you will change the trajectory of their life. As Americans united by so much, we have in common. What does this really look like for us? So what does that look like for us? Walking justly, loving mercy and kindness, being humble before God. How can families address the issues that divide us when it comes to this? Well, the first thing for our children is to model this as parents. We need to be people who correct and challenge ideals, systems, prejudices, biases that are wrong. We need to be willing to identify things for what they are and have the courage to stand for what is right. And the courage to give people their just due. Justice is uncomfortable sometimes. Sometimes it will take you stepping out of your group, because our groups sometimes are going the wrong direction. We know they are, but we don't have the courage to step outside. We need to be people who are willing to act justly and correct these things. Secondly, we need to be people who are kind. We need to respect each other's humanity. As I go back to that first verse I read in Psalms, we are created in the image of God. We are all image bearers. Whether we wear blue or red, whether we are black or white, whether we're poor or very wealthy, we need to have a common respect for all humanity because we're image bearers of God. Thirdly, humility is not weakness. I say that as a football player. Humility is not weakness, but it is posturing yourself in a way to understand that it's all about you. You are not the most important thing or the most important person. As a matter of fact, somebody else has equal value to you, no matter what their occupation is. Humility before God makes you humble before the people. It opens lines of communication. When I come at you in a way that is hostile, even though I may be right, you don't want to hear anything I have to say. But if I come to you in a way that is humble, those lines of communication are open. I think that's vitally important for us as we try to be change makers when it comes to truth and virtues and the things of God in our culture. How we say what we say is as important as what we say. Some of the issues that we're dealing with, and we mentioned them already, that we need to deal with justice, mercy, and humility, is racism in our culture. It is not just a thing of the past. Its legacy is alive and well today. And I was having this conversation with a good friend of mine not too long ago, a couple days ago, and we were talking about the idea of color blindness. And I said, you know what, it's not about color blindness. It is about embracing all of our differences, celebrating them, but realizing that my difference is not better than yours. My difference is not more important than yours. Actually, we celebrate our differences because God created us that way. We celebrate the fact that we come from different places, we look differently, we have different tastes, all those things. We have different customs. And mine is not better than yours, it's just different. That's what it means to address racism in a way with truth, mercy, and humility. Secondly, another big issue that we talked about a little bit is sanctity of life, abortion. I watched in horror, as many of you did, as New York legislators cheered like they were at the Super Bowl when the bill passed to allow death up until birth, up and through birth. I watched that in horror. 60 million have passed away since Roe v. Wade. 60 million have been killed since Roe v. Wade. Just this week, there was a bill that did not pass that will protect those children at that vital point of entry into the world. I believe that we cannot be distracted by this extreme, although it's very, very important. I believe that we always have to steer to the truth that life begins at conception. And as such, we need to defend it that way. It's very easy. It's very easy. And we should be in an uproar about this. But don't allow that to distract us from the truth that life begins at conception, and it is important all the way through gestation, all the way until death. We need to be pro-whole life people. Many times they say we're pro-life, but we don't care about people. No, we need to be pro-whole life people. We need to be people that stand for people when they're conceived, and they're this big, all the way until they leave this earth. That's what it means truly to be pro-life. Another issue of life is the sex trafficking. My wife and I have been really involved with that lately. There are 2 million children in the global sex trade, 2 million minors that are traded and exploited for sex in the United States as well as around the world. These young men and young women are voiceless. What voice has God given you to stand in the gap for them? Not just for abortion, but also for this issue. I have a friend that says that justice issue is a seamless garment. We don't have to just stand for one issue. We can multitask. I'm looking at you all, I think you guys can multitask. We can be people who stand for multiple issues because they all fall under the issue of justice. Poverty is another issue that we need to enter with truth and humility and virtue. We go around New Orleans a lot of times and we see people, and one thing that my wife and I love to do is we like to do different events with our foundation, but we always want our kids to be involved. We always want them to see what's happening. And one thing that they do, it was my wife's idea, is we have these little bags that we give to people. It has a bunch of essentials in there, maybe to help them through the night or through the week or whatever it may be. And the point is not just to do something nice, but the point is to show them that they are to be a conduit of blessing. They receive, it's their job to pass out to others. We want them to see that they have an ability, like we talked about the arrows, to change the life of somebody else. Another issue that's very tough in our culture right now is sexuality. Yes. The lines have been blurred. When it comes to God's best for us, one man, one woman in the context of marriage for life, that's what He ordained for us. We need to be people who, although we may have had missteps at times, we need to be people that steer culture back to what He has for us. We need to be people that want to get in the driver's seat and pull it back. Don't allow yourself to be people of relativism. Don't allow yourself to be people who compromise. Even though it's not popular, speak into the culture that this is what we know is right, and although we all fall short, this is the standard that is set, and this is what we want to steer ourselves and hold ourselves accountable to. Another issue, religious freedom. I remember a couple years ago when Coach Kennedy up there at Birmingham High School, he was praying with his players and he was fired. I remember when Jack Phillips had the whole uproar about the cake. Religious freedom is something that we hold dear and something that we have to continue to fight for. All these issues I mentioned, though, we don't get anywhere as believers, as families, as mothers, fathers, as conservatives, if we don't enter into the conversation, just like the verse of Micah said, with justice, with mercy, and with humility. Lastly, in March of 1865, about a month before he was assassinated, President Abraham Lincoln said he was trying to bring the country back together after a bloody, bloody civil war. A war that divided families, a war that divided the nation, and he was charged with the job of bringing the country together after such a huge split. And in the speech he says, with malice toward none, with charity for all, with firmness in the right as God gives us to see the light, let us strive on to finish the work we are in, to bind up the nation's wounds, to care for him who shall have borne the battle, and for his widow and his orphan, to do all which may achieve and cherish the just and lasting peace among ourselves and with our nations. My challenge to you all is to be people who are willing to bind up the nation. Bind up your families. Bind up the issues that are dividing your family. Bind up the issues that are dividing your neighborhood. Bind up the issues that are dividing your state, and be willing to step into these issues as and be people who are willing to bind things together. It will take sacrifice. It may be painful, but it will be very, very rewarding. Bridging this gap, I believe, starts at home first, which is my initial point when talking about families, that all these things out there that we want to be involved in are important, but they start at home. Learning how to have these conversations, learning how to do this work starts at home, and then it permeates out to the public school. My wife says this all the time. She says, Benjamin, it's not about you. Benjamin, it's not about you. She's been saying it to me for a while. I'm starting to think. Her point in saying that, though, is there are so many things that I feel aren't right that affect me. There's so many times when I want everything to be about how it helps my family, how it helps my desires. And she said, Benjamin, it's not always about you. Yes, that's right. What is God doing through you? Yes. How are you being obedient and allowing him to work through you? It may not turn out how you want it to be. It may not always be about what you want. It's not about you. It's about the greater good. But on the flip side, it is about you. Because if we don't do what we're called to do, our families, our neighborhoods, our country, our world will suffer because of it. Bind up the wounds. Do what you've been called to do. Engage. And be people who are willing to act with justice, with truth, with mercy, and to walk humbly before God. Thank you.
America is built and based on liberties and freedoms. Liberty HealthShare brings that to healthcare. The liberty of choosing your own doctor, the liberty of choosing your own hospital. Liberty HealthShare makes healthcare affordable to millions of Americans. Ignite your liberty, starting at $199 for a single, $399 for a couple. No matter how big the family, only $529. That's $529 for the entire family. To learn how you can save, go to igniteyourliberty.com. Igniteyourliberty.com.
What happened to our morality? Good old-fashioned values. When kindness was a currency. When integrity was expected. Tell the children be honest. And people are loyal too.
Are you looking for these things in your healthcare? Choose your own doctor and hospital. Plans starting at $199 or, no matter how big the family, only $529. That's $529 for the entire family. Go to igniteyourliberty.com. That's igniteyourliberty.com.
You know, someone very profoundly once said, many years ago, that fascism never comes to America without liberalism. What is fascism? Fascism is private ownership, private enterprise, but total government control and regulation. Well, isn't this the liberal philosophy? The conservative, so-called, is the one that says, less government, get off my back, get out of my pocket, and let me have more control of my own destiny.
Their 2020 platform sounds identical to policies already tried and now failing in the collapsed socialist state of Venezuela.
You know, it's funny, sometimes American journalists talk about how bad the country is because people are lining up for food. That's a good thing.
I believe it will totally eliminate private insurance. So for people out there who like their insurance, well, they don't get to keep it.
Let's eliminate all of that. Let's move on.
Abolish ICE. It's a growing call from Democrats to get rid of the agency that arrests and removes illegal immigrants in the U.S.
I think we should get rid of ICE.
We need to probably think about starting from scratch.
Why is it good for us to pay for the health care bills of people who snuck in here against our law?
It's good for people who are in our country, who are contributing to this country's success.
Or does it also apply to, I don't know, gang members or vagrants? I think they were covered too, weren't they?
These hot-button issues like free college, free healthcare, once thought to be radical, appear to be the starting line in this Democratic primary.
The three core demands of the National Day of Action are free public college, a cancellation of student debt, and a $15 minimum wage for people who work on the campus.
And how's that going to be paid?
Great question. I mean, you know, so...
Do you call yourself radical?
Yeah, you know, if that's what radical means, call me a radical.
Nancy Pelosi, do you recognize her as the leader for the House Democrats?
As you are aware, we are diligent.
I think one way you get rid of Trump is a crashing economy, so please bring on the recession. Sorry if that hurts people.
And if you see anybody from that cabinet in a restaurant, you get out and you tell them they're not welcome.
May go low, be kicked.
Ilhan Omar under attack for anti-Semitic tweets.
Here's one.
No, thank you.
You used the term the occupation of Palestine. What did you mean by that? I think what I meant is like the settlements that are increasing. I am not the expert.
They are the future face of the Democratic Party. They are not only anti-Israel, but often that anti-Zionism morphs into anti-Semitism.
Either the Klansman or the guy in blackface is right now the Democratic governor of Virginia, Ralph Northam.
Northam's nickname was a racial slur.
They called me Coon Man. I did participate in a dance contest in which I darkened my face as part of a Michael Jackson costume. I actually won the contest because I had learned how to do the moonwalk. My wife says inappropriate circumstances.
Democratic Senator Elizabeth Warren of Massachusetts with a DNA test to prove her Native American ancestry.
Her DNA test claiming she's part Native American appears to be backfiring.
Tonight, the leaders of the Cherokee Nation are speaking out against Senator Elizabeth Warren's campaign video touting her Native American ancestry.
You consider dropping out of the race?
You're talking about zero carbon emissions, no use of fossil fuels within 12 years.
That is the goal. It's ambitious, and...
How is that possible to let everybody having to drive an electric car?
Admitting in earlier drafts that, quote,
we aren't sure that we'll be able to fully get rid of farting cows and airplanes that fast.
I really don't like their policy of taking away your car, of taking away your airplane flights. That's arbitrary. We don't own cows anymore. You know, they're not a problem.
It was stunning how quickly some Democrats jumped on this proposal.
We need to be bold. Oh, it's impractical. Oh, it's too expensive. Keeping track of Democrats who might be driving a hard left, and a lot of them happy to do so.
Socialism is apparently becoming mainstream.